all right. What's going on, everyone? How y'all doing? It's going to be another good day here. Figured we get some bounties done today while we do a little bit of crypto research. Definitely some videos I've been wanting to catch up on. Looks like Don BJ jumping in first on Twitch and F2P Gaming with the win on YouTube. Watch out. How you guys doing? Loving the support, boys. Hope y'all are doing good. We're going to be doing a little grinding. Got some bounties we need to complete. Hope your days are going pretty well. But yeah, we're probably going to be putting on some little bit of crypto research while we grind in the background. I can give you guys my feedback on it. Just a couple of videos that caught my interest that I like to go review every so often. Let's see, where am I going? I think we're going to go we're going full green right now because we're going to Isle. Let me see. Yeah, it's green, uncommon. We're going to have to go grind it out in the lower levels. But we'll get it going for you here. Let me see. For the tools, switch this up. The new loadout feature is going to be real nice. I can tell you what. You know what? Let's switch up the pet. I guess let's go with the Billy Boo. Why not? And let's switch up the outfit. And let's go with the... What do you want to go with? You want to go with the Binance hoodie? We can go with a little bit of Binance hoodie. Or maybe we wear... Yeah, I never wear the Binance hoodie. Why not? Damn, son, you're never going to finish these bounties if you stream every day. It's slow motion for you. I know, bro. I know. No. We'll get it done, man. We'll get it done. I'll freak out when I start seeing that counter go down, if you know what I mean. But which will probably be starting pretty soon, am I right? There's still like 27 left, I think. So as long as there's 27, I think we're fine. But I actually did almost all the easy bounties already for the week. I did it over the weekend. So now it's pretty much just... Now it's pretty much just making sure that we get these ones done. I try not to put too much pressure on myself here. Yeah, there we go. Let's see how many are left. 27 still. Ivana hasn't claimed hers yet. So yeah, all of these unfortunately are going to take a while. Literally take a while. So I'm probably not going to... I could complete them all if I had time, and I'm hoping that I will have time. But we're going to have to see how it goes, man. You know how life can be. But while we jump in this first run here real fast, let me know what you guys think about the stream quality. We doing okay? Let me pull it up really fast. I think we're doing okay. I don't think it's too bad. Okay, so I'm going to quickly... Gorgandine jumping on in. How's it going? I think I'm going to get this. Work was good, man. Work was good. To be quite honest, I worked very little today, but I got done all the errands that I had to get done. Mintash, bro. How you doing? Good to see you in the stream. Before I jump into this, let me go ahead and get this video started. This one's the first video is going to be an interesting one that I wanted to go through. It's about a year old. I listen to it every so often just because I kind of think it's like one of the videos that gives me like a firm understanding of like the fundamental concepts of like crypto gaming and the metaverse. And it's like produced by one of the like top researchers in the field, A16Z, if you're not familiar with them, one of the largest investors in all of crypto. Gorgadine doing what he does. Gotta love it. Oh, I can do this now? Oh, this is sweet. Hold on, let me see. Do me a quick favor, guys, in chat. Can everyone just type something, type anything? I want to make sure that it pops up on my screen because I was having a little bit of issues real fast. Just give me a thumbs up real fast in the chat. Something. Okay, there's that. That came through. Ghost card. Okay, ghost card popped in. All right, good. Yeah, this is going to work. Back to the... See... F2P Gaming. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, yeah, it's going to work. We're good. I was having a little bit of issues, But this is a lot better now because with my new setup, or not with the new setup, but with the, oh man. What did I do? Did I mess up the screen? Literally right when I say everything looks good is when I'm like, oh man, did I mess everything up? Okay, this is perfect. I'll go here. Okay, let's see if I don't break something, guys. Because technically, if I do this, voila! Okay, yeah, so this is we're gonna start the video here. I'm gonna have it on the side. You guys can listen in the background while you grind out. But it is a video produced by A16Z. It's like one of their like crypto school, like catching up the general public. In this case, they're speaking with like a room full of game developers and talking about what crypto gaming could mean for the future. It's about a year old, so a lot of things have happened since then. But it's being hosted by Josh Williams, who I believe was the developer of Tribes. One of the developers of Tribes. So it's he gives a really good perspective. So I'm gonna go ahead and start this up while we get the grind going. It's only like 30, 45 minutes, so feel free to listen on in the background. I'll go ahead and give you my commentary over it if y'all type in the chat. So let me get this going. It should be coming out pretty soon. There we go. Jumping on in. Ready, set, go.
Next up, we're going to jump straight into next session, which is going to be a fireside chat with Josh Williams, who's the CEO and co-founder of Forte, which is a new blockchain gaming platform that aims to help align developers and players in how they earn economically. And interviewing Josh is going to be Jeff Tunnell, who is the founder of Monster Ideas and a number of other companies that he founded earlier, where he designed, directed, produced hundreds of games. So Jeff and Josh, come on up.
All right, so in my long career as a game and game technology creator, I've seen lots of new platforms and new technologies come along that have like totally changed the way we had to make games. Probably the biggest one of those, well, obviously the biggest one was the advent of the internet.
Should be hearing me about equal to that.
It took our industry, 10 years to figure it out. And I think we're kind of still figuring it out, but that was when it really started to happen. And one of the games that I created is called Tribes.
Hell of a game, man.
It was
Loved
a
playing
first-person team-based shooter, kind of one of the first ones that really incorporated a lot of what was going on the internet. And it was kind of controversial for us inside the company at the time because it was a big project when we got to the end and we didn't have time to put a single player into it. And so we launched it as multiplayer only, and that was really risky at the time, but it ended up that it did work. Now it just seems really obvious that everybody releases a lot of multiplayer only games.
Pretty much after Halo 2, right? Everyone was just like, everything multiplayer.
In the future, it's going to be kind of similar for blockchain. It's going to really cause some big disruption in games. And I think Josh is going to tell us some of what blockchain will be able to unleash for us in games.
Yeah, I think exactly as you said, Jeff, it's a good analogy. Blockchain will disrupt and change gaming in I think, a very similar way to the internet. It might cause even bigger changes because the internet helped interconnect players, and Tribes was really an example of a great innovative game designer, who embraced the bleeding edge technology early on to create a game that was really revolutionary, and I played Tribes a lot when I was a kid. Blockchain will be similar and maybe bigger because it's not just interconnecting people, but changing potentially the business model of games and creating the potential for a lot better game economies that align developers and players and work much better for both of them. They can really do that in 4 ways. So the first way is by leveraging blockchain technology, games can allow players to really own the assets in their games. Today, players in games spend about $150 billion a year purchasing games and digital goods in games. And the majority of that revenue actually is purchasing goods inside of games.
You know what, really quick on that while I pause the video, like it's 150 billion in terms of annual revenue, right? But actually, I was looking through the numbers. Those are the numbers that are based on like the top public companies. So we're talking about like the EAs, the Microsofts, Steam, things like that. But it doesn't take into account like all of the other aspects where money comes into the industry. So like artists creating things like creating like digital artifacts that can be put into like the Steam store. It doesn't count stuff like esports competitions, the various little competitions. It doesn't count all of those other ways. So gaming's even huger than that number represents. But there you go.
But players don't own any of them. So that's the first one. When you introduce ownership, it could really change the way that the games are made and played and how the economies work. The second one is blockchains enable you to have the provenance of every item and every asset in the game. So that means you can know the history of every item in a game. The third is
it's all about the extra information.
Games can create really rich marketplaces, or blockchain can create really rich marketplaces inside of games. So when players own these assets and you can determine whether or not an asset is real, its history and provenance, you can create rich marketplaces around those items. And the fourth is because blockchains can incorporate smart contracts, code that executes autonomously through the blockchain. You can create these rich incentive systems that reward players and participants in the game in different ways.
Yeah, so that's a really quick overview. We're going to delve into it a little bit more. Let's talk about the ownership a little bit.
Sure.
A little bit more, a little deeper.
Yeah, so if you think about it, the ability for players to really own things inside of games, the virtual goods and virtual currencies inside of games, it transforms the purchases that players are making from pure expenditures, where again players are taking over $100 billion a year out of their wallets to purchase these goods. It transforms them from expenditures to assets that the players own. And so players could choose to resell assets if they own them. They could choose to incorporate the assets into another asset that might be
my bad if I'm playing with the poker chips.
And the thing about these assets being stored on blockchains is no one can take the asset away from the player. The player truly owns it, and they don't have to trust a third party, including the game developer themselves, that they truly own the asset.
Let me push back a little bit on that concept about game developers and not like true ownership. Like the actual tangible ownership of the item, that's legit. That stands by it. But I mean, I think you all would tend to agree with me here that if we're talking about things like either cosmetics or utility-based items in video games, like these items are purely, I would venture to say are purely valued based on their use inside games. So, even though a developer can't necessarily take control or take possession back of a specific item, like how that developer decides to like implement going into the future, and like whether or not they have the ability to survive, like those are things that will actually could cause the value of the items to go to zero or skyrocket, right? So, the idea of just owning it is great. Like that's a good, that's like a fundamental level. Like you need to be able to own these things in order for like true economies to be able to grow. But it by itself is not enough. Ownership by itself is not enough, and I'm sure a lot of you, like seeing other games in the space, obviously know that this is the case. I would just point to what is it, Rainbow Six Siege? No, which one was it that they just recently closed down after launching NFTs by, I think it was Ubisoft. No, it's not Rainbow Six Siege. I'll have to check on that, but we'll go ahead and continue here where we left off.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what most people think about when they think about
can also ban your NFTs, exactly.
Technologies or blockchain technologies in games, but it really is important. I'll just do like a pretty obvious example here, but imagine you've played WoW for a year and you take your rogue up to level 70 and you're tired of playing it and you want to become a warrior. if that
You
was
know, I guess the idea about collectability doesn't matter. Ownership is more important for collectability. Because even if the game fails, like if it's a collectible, like people will always remember that NFT for whatever reason. Doesn't matter if it has utility anymore. Now it's just based off of
that's exactly right.
Collectability.
And, when you play a game and you're really into it, you get to really care about the assets you have in the game. You care about your characters. You sometimes put a lot of money into those things. And so to see real value and to truly own those things and to be able to do what you want with them as a player would be, great as a player and transformative for games as a whole. And, touching on the second point, which is really the provenance of the items, of the assets in a game that blockchains enable, what that lets you do is know that when someone is claiming that they have an asset and they have the right to an asset, you can verify that is true. You don't have to trust anyone to do that. So you can imagine in the real world, outside of games, if someone was trying to sell you a basketball jersey and they said, hey, this is the jersey that Steph Curry wore in the final game of the 2015 NBA championships when they won, and so it's going to cost $1,000, you would just have to trust them that that's true, or maybe find a third party to trust that has somehow certified that that's the real deal. What's cool about games and blockchain is because the assets are digital, if they're stored on a blockchain, you don't have to trust anyone. When someone says that, hey, this item, maybe it's a sword, this is the sword that was used by the first player to ever take down the biggest, baddest boss in the game, you could know that it's that collectible, unique item, and maybe that it's got some special characteristics unlocked because it is that unique item. And so blockchain enables that as well.
Yeah, and that's actually, it might sound kind of trivial.
Those are features that are probably going to be coming with Infinity's launch as well.
It can take an asset
that extra
and
metadata.
make it more unique, more collectible.
Who crafted it?
And that's,
who
again,
first found it?
Kind of an obvious thing, but when you
completed
start really
a quest
thinking
with it
deeply about this, it makes it's pretty important. And then you can also kind of start seeing how people could do things like maybe there's an enterprising person that goes out and collects this open information from tons and tons of games and puts it all on one website, and maybe it's kind of like an appraisal website so that you can go and you can check the value of your plus 18 sword in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that leads to the third point, which is you can create these rich marketplaces in games, right? So one player's own the assets, and they know they own it, and so they therefore ascribe value to them, and they can verify without trusting anyone the history of the assets and its authenticity. You can start to price items, you can start to trade items together and create these rich marketplaces. And the richness of the marketplaces can be, not only enabling trading between players and the transfer of assets and value between players, but also pretty complex economic designs around how that value gets split up. And this is where developers can start to benefit as well, so that they might take a share of transactions.
Hey.
If you had these assets that were owned by,
that
example we used of a sword that was, used to take down the biggest boss in the game for the first time. The
player a 1 month sub to
that
Don't
killed
Be
that
Jane.
boss with that sword could always take a share if the
Welcome to the strike team,
smart
baby.
contracts were structured this way, of every transaction, every trade of that sword subsequently. So you can open up all these new designs that were never possible prior to blockchain or weren't possible without solely trusting the game developer.
Yeah, and also to go a little further on it, like, granted, this was a year ago, right, when this video was published, but like now we already have the concept of, we have the concepts here of like liquidity pools, being able to fund the early liquidity for the launch of a token inside of a game, or, down the road, we're going to definitely be getting the ability to be able to use your NFTs as collateral for loans, right? Like, let's say one of these games has a really growing economy, prior to what's been happening recently with Axie. I think it was really, a foreseen conclusion upon success that players are going to be able to put those assets, put those items into a lending pool and be able to borrow against it. That's just the nature of economics working, and how it could look when it's applied to digital worlds. But the concept that they were talking about right now about marketplaces, I think, is also a really fascinating one to see evolve. We've seen the ongoing battle and the fight for dominance that OpenSea had versus like Super Rare. We've also seen like the Engine X marketplace being launched, and it's less success, or less amount of success compared to the others, and there's various reasons for that. Then we have the third layer, really, which is like in-game marketplaces now, like what we see inside Lost Relics and various other games. Like these different types of marketplaces are each going to have their own individual strengths and weaknesses, and will likely provide different services. You hear a lot of the idea about like one marketplace to rule them all because it's like all an open, decentralized ecosystem. But the truth is actually that there will be walls. There will be gated walls for some reason or another, mostly probably related around security. But they will exist, which will mean multiple types of marketplaces will exist. So interesting to see how it plays out in the future.
Themselves.
Yeah, and you could also use that
Good day, Zolo.
For incentives
Thank you for jumping on in.
Move your players around to help them do things that you want them to do, and also that they've kind of wanted to do anyway in the game.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the fourth one. It's designing incentive structures in the game. So when you have a game that has an economy based on real asset values that players own, you can have currencies, you can have assets in that game. You could start to grant, as a developer, you can write smart contracts that essentially incentivize or reward players through grants of currencies and assets and items when they do things that are helpful for the game and for other players. So you could reward players for, maybe senior players who have experienced a lot of the game. You could give them, currency. You could drop into their account currency for helping new players, get through a dungeon for the very first time. And
Karmu
so you can create
jumping
these really
on the
rich
stream, and Dr. Lute's in here too. The whole Lost Relics gang, gotta love it.
Previously, if you start to incorporate blockchain technology, and there's a lot of cool stuff. We're working with developers to do like that. We're working with a battle royale game. Battle royale games are like Fortnite. It kind of incorporates a bunch of the things we just talked about. The skins, there are skins in the game right now, so those are cosmetics that you can equip on your character to make them look differently. It doesn't affect the gameplay in this case, but it personalizes the character for you. This developer that we're working with is tokenizing the skins in the game. So they're putting the skins on the blockchain, they're letting players truly own them, and they're making the skins tradable within the game. And that creates a new revenue stream for the developer, and it gives the players much more agency, much more ownership in the game, and it makes the game more fun for the players, because now they can benefit from the game not only from it being fun, but by doing a good job unlocking new skins and potentially earning an income from them.
Yeah. I think that's honestly the key, is the ability for developers, the ability for developers to be able to pretty much share in the successes of the game with its player base. Like, I think that is going to be the key. There is no like one-stop solution on what is the most efficient way to make this happen. I'm sure every single game is going to have their own solutions to it. But I think the more that you can like intertwine the success for the developer with the success for the players, the better the overall system would be. I also think that we're going to see a lot of different models play out, because you're going to see like this in the way they describe it right now in the video, and the way that I think most blockchain gamers perceive it is that they jump into a game wanting the economic system to have already been created. They like, how many times do we hear gamers come in and they say something like, hey, how do I make money? Or how do I earn here? Like in this game, how do I earn? But like, just even that question implies that it's the developer's responsibility to create the economic model. But that's not how economics works. Like, you can create the chain of transactions, in a market. You can create the idea of how, let's say there's someone has resources that then they sell to a constructor who makes houses, who then someone purchases the houses, who then rents them out to some other people. You can create the chain of how it's supposed to work, but like the economy is actually not that chain. It's the interactions between the people across that entire chain, how they interact with each other, and how they like share, how they transact value with each other. So like, the developer is creating like a very rough framework that's not supposed to be the entire system. But I think most players believe that it's supposed to be. And I think that might be some of the reasons for like these rude awakenings, I guess, across crypto gaming. I think over the next few years, we're going to see, and Axie had a little bit of this play out, like we're going to start seeing a little bit more of the entrepreneurship and the idea of players adding value into games. Right now, I think players think that if they put value into the games, that all that value goes to the developer. But I think as this whole space grows, if developers and players are able to create these incentive structures that where both benefit, then players would then be incentivized to build inside these game worlds that don't technically belong to them, if they feel there's a reward. The same way that if all of a sudden a new city in your area, some group of unoccupied land was near you, and you wanted to form a city, what you would do is you would start to get different people to invest in the development of that space, even if they don't own the land, right? You would want to incentivize them for doing so. Same thing with these digital worlds. You want players to feel like that wealth that they have the ability to extract wealth, and then if they're able to extract some type of wealth, that also incentivizes it incentivizes growth, because the more you're able to invest, theoretically, the more you're able to extract later on, and it's a perpetual system that feeds upon itself. But yeah, I really do think responsibility falls between both parties.
Yeah, so I actually have some personal experience where this would have helped me out tons on one of the games that we created. We created a game for Disney and Playdom called Social City. It was a social city building game that was on the Facebook platform back when that was going really big, and we ended up. It was a hit. It had 2 million daily active users. My mom played it, my sister, my wife. First time in my career that I had that happen. And so that was an interesting aside. But while the game was very successful and was making a ton of money, we were really worried about the business model, because it was really just selling digital goods. Put a new building in, put a new road in, put a new sidewalk in, and you could see where we were going to hit a wall in that. So we were in the back room, just like squirrels running as fast as we could go, trying to figure out a way to make an economy. But back then, we just did not have the tools. It would be so wonderful to have these blockchain tools. So I'd like maybe talk a little bit about how you build these community economies for these games.
Talk with a developer about, not from the crypto space, about what type of tools
that earliest and most successful free-to-play games in the
for
West.
the development of economies.
And it
Again, not
Jeff,
crypto-related developers.
it hit the same problem that pretty much every free-to-play game today runs into as it grows. And free-to-play games dominate the games industry today. They kind of took the industry from, $10 to $40 billion 20 years ago to $150 billion plus a year today, because what they do is they allowed players to play a game for free for the first time, and that aligned developers and players a little more than they had been in the past. Prior to free-to-play games, players had to purchase the game up front without really getting a chance to see it. And so you couldn't get these, it was really hard to get these massive audiences in games. And players, you were asking them to spend $50 or $60 in a game without even knowing what it was really like to play it. The free-to-play games, you get a little closer to the player, a little bit more aligned with the player in that, okay, you let the player come in for free, which is great. That's a benefit for the player. But then you have to figure out how to monetize it, because you didn't monetize it up front. And you run into this problem that Social City and every other major free-to-play game runs into, which is you constantly have to pump out new content as a developer. You have to sell players more and more of these goods inside of a game, because it's your only way to make revenue. And the really pernicious thing that happens in this model, even though it's maybe friendlier in some ways to players than pure upfront purchases, is a small percentage of the audience ends up purchasing anything at all. And our team and myself, we've seen some of the most successful free-to-play games in the world, and almost across the board. A very small percentage of the audience, 5% or less typically, makes any purchase whatsoever. And very
That's
frequently,
crazy to me.
less than 1% of players in the top free-to-play games account for 80% or more of the revenue.
Yeah.
So what that means is you have a very small percentage of your audience that you end up catering to. And those individual players often spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars a year. You know, it sounds crazy in these games. And so you have to produce content that caters to them without alienating, you know, the rest of the players that don't do it. And it's incredible that don't pay anything. And that's an incredibly challenging design problem. It's incredibly frustrating for players to feel like, you know, the people that spend the most might be able to get the coolest stuff in the game or be more powerful in the game. And so there's still misalignment even in the free-to-play model.
You know that kind of hits exactly what I was talking about with Cliff, the idea in the last interview that we had, the fireside chat, I should say. We talked about free to play and like the evolution of free to play, and you know, the idea here was like originally, I guess free to play. One of the main reasons why it worked was the idea of network effects, which was now that you have the ability for players to join a game for free, that means inherently that these games will be more populated, and more population increases more transactions for the developer, even though there's no upfront cost, but also creates transactions between the community themselves, right? So if free to play, you know, in other words, you've already brought the price down to zero. Access is now being given away to these digital worlds for the idea, simply because you want people to populate it, okay? And obviously all the benefits that come with that population. But how do you beat that? How do you beat free? And now we start to be introduced to the idea of the play to earn model, or the play and earn model, or whatever new terminology we're going to use. Because in these new systems and these new scenarios, now you can beat free. Because now instead of you playing the game for purely entertainment purposes, now if incentivized correctly and if the system is built out correctly, now you're going to be able to actually earn from the game, and in essence earn from both other players. Really, when we say earning from other players, like the way I like to look at it is the traditional model, which was before all the earning were microtransactions that went to the developer. Now, pretty much the developer, should they choose, can say they can still operate in the old model, but they can now choose, hey, you know what? Pretty much a percentage or a portion of that is going to be going back to the player base. To then account for those differences. So really, like, technically we are earning from other players, but that was already happening because whales were funding the developments of these games, and the players that were playing for free were the ones that were benefiting from it, right? So if a game costs $60, an arbitrary number, but regardless, if the games cost $60 and you got to play for free, then a whale paid $60 for you to play with them or alongside them or in their universe. So nothing ever really was free, but the free-to-play model and terminology just took off so much that everyone presumes that it's free. That word sounds weird. I'm probably just saying it wrong. But so if we now go into a model where players are getting paid, how do you also create that system how do you balance that system between earning between developers and earning between players? And at what point do the responsibilities of that system shift from strictly developer? Because it can't be developer just alone anymore. Now there has to be player feedback and player input, both with ideas and with finances. So we'll see.
What blockchain technology and those four new interaction models, economic models, new capabilities that blockchain enables for games can really do is align players and developers, where as a developer, you can start to pull a marketplace, the ownership that players have of the items in your game. You can start to pull a marketplace around those into the game and create win-wins with players, where players now own value, they can transact value, they can even earn an income from the game, and you as a developer can create a bigger economy without just having to create new content all the time. If you allow players to trade, just as a simple example, you can earn a revenue stream from those trades as they occur over time.
So yeah, I mean, it might be kind of obvious, but one of the first things you would think about doing there, if we talk about win-win or community economies, would be a lot of the really big games nowadays. They have the gray market that's out there, for buying World of Warcraft gold, or different skins for different games, or even trading accounts around. Will get you banned from the game nowadays, but now you could bring that economy into the game and get rid of a lot of the fraud and things like that that's happening out in the real world.
That's exactly right. And players want to be able to do this, as we discussed earlier.
To be fair, you introduce also a new, fraud, it's just a cat and mouse game like we've talked about in the past. So by eliminating that old type of fraud, by now allowing players to strictly trade and sell to each other, now you introduce new types of fraud because of the technology that is used to accomplish the first goal. Right. So now the idea of being able to, hot wallets, cold wallets, security hacks, it's going to continue, unfortunately. And we just got to be careful as we play it out.
When you invest a lot of time or money into your characters or assets or items in a game, you want to be able to trade them sometimes. And sometimes, a game might be designed to require you to spend a lot of time in order to get the cool stuff that you want. And you would love, as a player, to be able to just go buy that thing sometimes.
Gorgadine, I would push back a little bit on
players do this.
There, the idea about the gray markets killing games. The way I see these markets is I see these are just natural evolutions of how gamers want to interact. When you log into a game, if you want gold, if you want to accomplish whatever you want in the game and it requires gold, then you want gold. And there doesn't need to just be one way to get gold. The problems are that game companies are I think it really comes down to the barriers, the disincentives that gaming companies in the past were putting into games that were causing issues, that were causing games to what were your words? How did you put it? That are killing some games. You know what I mean? Vicky Jan, how can I start playing this game? Lost Relics. So Lost Relics is you can go to the website lostrelics.io. And right now, in order to get into the game, you need to buy a 7-day pass or a 7-day pendant or greater. You can buy any one of the larger ones if you like. Once you get into the game, you're completely in. Right now, free-to-play access, if you want that, you have to get on a waiting list with more than 100,000 players. So it's going to take a significant amount of time for you to get on in there. And supposedly there is a new patch that will be coming soon that will be pretty big. So I highly recommend that if you want to get in, the 7-day pass is the way to do it. But for now, we're going to go ahead and continue on with the video.
There's massive kind of side economy outside of that $150 billion a year where players are just trading with each other outside of the games. But it's problematic because the developers don't earn any revenue from those transactions. And players are always subject to the risk of counterparty fraud, as Jeff said. So, if you're trying to buy a new item from a game, from another player in a game, and it's not sanctioned by the game itself, you got to go to some third-party website, enter your credit card information, and risk, someone stealing, your identity or your credit card information.
That risk never goes away,
maybe not even get the item that you were trying to purchase in the game, despite taking that risk. When you leverage the blockchain to enable these marketplaces and economies inside of a game, you can do that in a secure, trustless fashion by leveraging the security of the blockchain itself.
Yeah, it's really just hard to.
It does solve a lot of problems. Blockchain really does solve a lot of problems, but it creates some new ones too.
Producer or
that we're just working the kinks out on. I think.
These
I still strongly believe in it.
Incredibly
obviously
powerful. I would like to, I'm a convert now, so I'm barely touching the ground. But when Josh first started talking to me about these incorporating blockchain into the games, I went on and started doing my own research and probably many of you, if you went out and looked up there, you kind of feel like it's kind of scammy out there. Everything feels a little bit like a pyramid scheme. And so I was like, I don't know about that. But then, the more you talk about it, when you get into it, there's just in addition to the 4 types of things that blockchain can unlock, that adds up to something way, way bigger. And I'd like Josh to explain that, because this is the conversion moment right here.
I think, when we talk with developers about these systems, they can.
I've heard a lot of people, Dr. Luke, make that same that. I don't know if it's a mistake. Trustless and trustful, like it's weird because like using blockchain technology, you don't technically need to trust anyone else that the transaction is going to go through once you submit it. You just got to trust the smart contract, right? So technically it is trustless. But then on the other hand, if you know that the transaction is going to go through no matter what, based on whatever the smart contract says, then it's fully trustable. So it's this, I don't know, like I see why people use both words. It's a weird one. I don't know.
Incorporated in their games. What really starts to get compelling about it is, when you think about it, games today, as Jeff said, in examples like Social City or the top, most successful games today, developers are really just acting as merchants where they're selling goods to players, and that's it. When you start to really get deep on what blockchain technology could enable for games, you realize there's many more ways for developers to benefit from the games they create, and to create games that are better for players as well. And so it kind of shifts you from being just a merchant to managing. You can think about it like, creating in your virtual world that you create in your game. You're also creating an economy that's more real. So it operates just like the real world, where we all in the real world, we own assets, we earn income, we conduct commerce and trade with each other, and blockchain can enable that inside the virtual worlds of games as well. So developers kind of shift from being just a merchant selling goods to, it's almost like you're managing a little country and trying to create the biggest economy that you can for the citizens inside of your country. And that unlocks new ways to earn revenue for the developer as well. So, there's again, four things you can do with that. So you can still continue to sell goods inside of the game, just like you do now, and those goods don't have to be on the blockchain. You can still sell goods that players don't own. So you don't lose anything by incorporating blockchain into your game. But you can also design around player ownership and the marketplaces we've talked about. And so you can start to set up the equivalent of a fiscal policy, essentially, in the parlance of macroeconomics and governments. You can think about what sorts of taxes and fees you want to operate in your economy. So players own assets, and you can set up the rules for how people can trade with each other. And you can also set up what the fees are and what the taxes might be as players start to trade with each other. Maybe you as a developer take 5% or 10% or 30% of every transaction. And it's really cool to think about how developers and players get aligned here, because
alignment is key.
Simple-minded developer might think, well, I'll just make the fee as high as I can. I'll charge 70% on every trade. And you could do that, but your game probably would be less successful than another game that charges lower fees and is more beneficial to players and encourages more trading. So what you really want to do is just you design your economy, this second portion of it with the fiscal policy, to encourage the creation of the largest possible economy, which means players are benefiting more too, because they're owners in the economy as well. So it really lines up players and developers. The third way that developers can benefit, the third revenue stream can be, so again, you have sale of goods, you have taxes and fees like a fiscal policy. The third way is you have assets in these games, and players own them, and developers can own them too. So you could have a reserve of assets, and the bigger you make your game, the better job you do in designing the game and making it fun and designing the economy, the more valuable the assets in your economy could be for both you and for the players. And so you as a developer could sell off those assets. They're not just virtual goods, they're the assets that are on the blockchain. And so that's a third way that developers can benefit in a way they really couldn't prior to the introduction of blockchain.
Yeah, and it's actually really amazing.
So I don't know if we have seen that in games, in crypto games yet. We've seen the opposite. We've seen the buying and burning of assets. We've seen the idea of being able to like increase the item's scarcity by having the developer reclaim some of those items, and then burn them, so that technically everybody in the economy benefit. But The problem I've always had with burning is that it's an artificial accounting transaction that doesn't actually increase. It doesn't increase any other aspect other than scarcity. And scarcity by itself, while is very important for the basics of supply and demand, it's not everything. It's the same reason why. How do I put it? I can't think of a metaphor right now, but I think scarcity feels to me like a fundamental level of economics that people in general, not just gamers, can understand. And because it's something that they can understand, that is the aspects that developers decide to go with because it is fundamental. But it's like step one, in potential solutions to some of these financial problems. I don't know. The problem is that you have to have a lot of balls to be able to push it any further, especially in games. But we're going to see it happen over the next few years.
If you start calculating this out and think of maybe the total addressable market here, I'm going to...
Sure. Yeah.
Got this great.
Yeah. I think and before we get to thinking about what the total macro picture could look like, the last way developers can make a revenue stream here is you can set a monetary policy too, just like you would in a country. So you can have whatever macroeconomic design you think will work best, or you kind of experiment and learn will work best inside of your game. So you can set rates of inflation. And you can, as we discussed at the beginning, you could reward players for different types of behaviors, and that might deflate, or that might inflate, the economy by producing more currency when you're granting players, maybe free gold or free coins for performing certain actions. Maybe it's logging in every day, maybe it's helping other players. But if even despite that inflation, if it helps players contribute to the game or perform actions that help the economy overall, it could grow the total size of the economy. And you, as a developer, can also participate in those rewards. You write it in a smart contract so that you can't change the rules willy-nilly. But let's say you allow players to create content in your game. And then you reward them through these inflationary kind of monetary mechanisms for the content that gets used the most by other players, right? So it might be a new dungeon that someone creates, or a new script of dialogue that an NPC, a non-player character in the game, says. And you might give more rewards to the most popular pieces of content for players. You could do the same thing for yourself as a developer. You're a great content creator. Maybe the new content you create also participates in those rewards. And if it's popular with players, that's worth it because it grew the total size of the economy. So if you step back and put all these pieces together, again, you're kind of creating a more market economy inside of games, instead of a command and control economy or just a pure merchant economy, which is the case in games today. And market economies are how the world works today, and the world's economy is much bigger today than it was in the past, and the same thing will happen in games. And a simple way to understand that might be, there are games like Fortnite today that have hundreds of millions of players that play them every single month. And those games are wildly successful. It's the most successful games that have ever been created or being created today. But they do, a couple $1 billion a year in revenue at their peak today, which is massive. But if you think about it, if you had a game that incorporated blockchain technology to create a real market economy for players inside of the game, and you got just 1 million players that were earning just a minimum livable wage, like say $30,000 a year inside of the game, because you created this rich economy, then that game, 1 million players making $30,000 a year from the game, would have a $30 billion a year economy, which would be by far the biggest game that's ever created, with only 1 million players that are able to achieve that. And that,
okay, so a couple things I need to push back on that on. I don't know where so my question is, like, yes, you can create market economies inside video games. Like that is yes, that's already existed, and blockchain technology is taking it to the next level. My question is, and it comes down to the idea of, it comes back to economics, which is like how big or how small can these different economies be within games and also be successful? Now, I don't know if what the most successful outlook for crypto games is that we have the Fortnites of the world implement Web3 technology, and those are the ones those are the only market economies inside games that work and exist. When we look back at the past, there's been a handful of games that have had market economies because of these black markets. We've had WoW, we've had RuneScape, we've had EVE Online, we've had EverQuest, we've had other huge MMOs do this, but not every single MMO and not every single video game. And so this same logic should apply to crypto games too, right? That not all crypto games will have successful economy launches, even though they have the tools to be able to make it happen. Or is that idea wrong? Is the idea that because we have the tools, every single one of these little games, even if they have a small player base or a small community, because of these tools now can have little economies that slowly grow over time? Because remember, like, if you're earning, even if it's a small economy and you're earning a percentage of the pie, if that pie, if you're getting a large slice of a small pie, that can still be smaller than a small piece in a huge pie, if you see what I'm saying, like based on scale, right? But so it's like you can have 1/4 of a personal pan pizza, but that's one little slice, or you can have just one slice of an extra large, but the extra large slice is double the size of your fourth. You know what I mean? From the personal pizza. But I don't know. I really don't. That's the question I want to know. Like, does this crypto technology, do these Web3 tools make it to where the likelihood for economic success and livelihood increases across all games, or does it only benefit the biggest of the biggest because they have scale? Like, I don't know that answer. And that's what I would like to see. That's what I would like to know in the future.
On its own would be larger than the entire global music industry.
Let me also push back on that. If we are going to have a global video game like launch, the one thing that I am confident in is that the average income of an individual inside these metaverses to begin with will not be $30,000 or even close. Like the average world the wage for the average worker across the entire world, I think right now in developed economies is like $2 an hour, as the average wage. So if we're really going to have global crypto games really take off, the amount of earning that's going to be generated from them is going to be, I would assume, around $2 an hour, plus or minus, percentages. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because I'm only speaking about the individual hourly average. There will be a lot of people that significantly make a lot of money from it, but there will also be a lot of people that don't make any money from it. So I guess it depends, or loses money from it. So it all depends, right?
And it's not difficult to imagine a game that could do that by incorporating these mechanisms.
Hey,
we moved to the Q&A.
So
my bad.
Quick questions. So I wasn't.
Did we get a raid?
I guess
let
I'm
me see. Or is that
still
the raid
curious
icon?
about what's the material
Did you get me
difference
there?
between?
Oh, we got a raid. Dr. Bigos
an
jumped on in
SDK
with the raid.
for
Thank you, my friend.
Implementing a lot of these economic type of interactions for games versus
hold on.
having
Let's
it be
go back.
blockchain.
This is good. I like where we start going into the Q&A.
I guess I'm still curious about what's the material difference between having an SDK for implementing a lot of these economic type of interactions for games versus having it be blockchain related.
Sure.
And if the issue is trusting the developer, I'm actually also curious because I'm just not that sure about how big the trust issue between a game player and game developer actually is. And
it's everything.
Yeah.
So the trust is everything.
Hear the question. So the reason to put this on blockchain versus just having an SDK or a central database that Op tried to operate.
Really quick on that question before he answers it. DMD jumps on in the chat and he says they are also assuming that a majority of earners will be putting money back into the economy. So I think that assumption has to occur. Because if that assumption does not occur, then I don't think you really have an economy. You have the idea that they were saying right now about these different types of schemes, right? Because like in order for an economy to exist, you have to have the circulation of value across all participants, and that velocity of how fast money or value circulates, that needs to continue. It doesn't have to be huge, but it needs to continue to perpetuate. It's the engine that's running. The moment that circulating value stops, the engine stalls out. And when the engine stalls out, the economy's done. So like, yeah, I do think earners would need to invest back in. So like the same way that like, hey, look, if I open a lemonade stand on the side of the street, and I really start to make a killing, then I start to say, you know what, maybe I'm going to take my profit and I'm going to open a second lemonade stand on the other side of the city, right? On the other side of the railroad tracks. And that key transaction there of the continued investment is the factor. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be putting money in or always reinvesting, but that reinvestment does need to exist one way or another. You know, Dr. Big goes, having a good stream. You're going to be lurking in a bit while you play some Apex. That's what I like to hear, my friend. Go kick some ass. Go win them games. And yeah, trust is everything, man. Trust is everything. CJ Warlock says in the chat as well. So a tax, baby. Yeah. So like the tax is the key, I think, because like pretty much all the tax is doing is that it's trying to take a portion of that economic value and put it back into the developer's hands or the government's hands in this case. I think there are incentive systems that don't have to require a tax, even though I think a tax is the easiest method for people to understand and also the easiest thing to implement because we have so many structures around it. So yeah, I bet a lot of games are going to implement taxes, and that's how we're going to start. But that isn't the only. That's not the only method, because like in a government, like the reason why they tax is because they want to generate an income, right? But in video games, developers can choose to generate incomes in other ways, like continuing putting out DLC or continuing putting out additional, game content or whatnot. Like there's different ways to monetize that video games have, that developers have in video games than governments do in real life. And that's mostly because of how strict of control, I guess, that developers have. Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know. I need to think about that some more. But let's jump into his answer really quick.
The economy is twofold. One, it's that it's really hard to secure these things as an individual developer. And by leveraging the public blockchains that exist, you're inheriting the hundreds of billions of dollars of security and stored value that exist on these blockchains today, instead of having to try to figure out how to secure your database from hackers or exploits, from gamers. So that's the first part, and it's the simpler part, but it's still important. The big thing is really the size of the economy you can create. So your players might trust you as a developer, especially your ardent fans who have maybe been loyal to you for years. But a new player who comes into the game and doesn't know who you are as a developer and doesn't have a lot of investment and engagement in your game isn't going to trust you as a developer as much as they will trust the broader marketplace that is represented by these blockchains and the assets that they live there. If they know, hey, these assets live on a blockchain and the developer actually can't control it even if they wanted to, you're going to have more trust than you would. And the important point there is not just trust, it's that it creates a larger economy. The reason we're able to conduct commerce today is because, we have an idea of safety and soundness in an economy. We think, even though we've seen it fail many times, and there's been different financial crises, people believe in the dollar enough to conduct, transactions. And so basically the more you can, and the promise of blockchain is that it can be totally trustless and unlock all these new economic activities where people are more sovereign and can choose who to trust. And so that just unlocks more economic activity. And it's the same thing in games where if you can maximize trust, you maximize the size of the economy. And so you want to do everything you can to maximize basically the degree that players can trust the economy itself as opposed to any one actor, including the developer.
Yeah. Yeah, and also DMD about your comment here, because we saw it in Axie, what happened with the majority of the earners that did not move up to breeders. I think you hit the key. You hit the nail on the head there, because see, the thing with Axie is that, yeah, that progression, that reinvestment of moving up to acquire, more coveted Axies to be able to breed and be able to sell that product, like that was the only method other than, there was two methods to earning, right? It was either that didn't involve daily gameplay. It was to reinvest. You either reinvested to acquire Axies to breed, or you reinvested to acquire Axies to win tournaments, to win in the competitions in the the season brackets and ladders. Those were really the only two methods that Axie had. For the other types of growth that happened were outside of the video game their ecosystem, which also is legit, right? Like the way Axie Chat got spun up, and the amount of income that group made, and then in essence reinvested that income back into the game as well. So it's like an outside party created income derived outside of the game, but obviously related to the game, and then use that money to be able to invest back into the game. Those same types of things need to occur, and there needs to be a lot of them. There needs to be a lot of choice, whether it's a musician that is able to put their music up that could potentially make it into a game, or an artist that could create some type of illustration that can go into a game, or entertainers that are on Twitch, or content creators, or market analysis, or research, video game research. All of these are these are horizontal businesses to the industry that affect the industry. And by industry, I mean blockchain gaming, or crypto gaming. So yeah. Good, really good point you brought up.
Two big properties of blockchain are interoperability.
Hold on, really quick. Let's see. CJ Warlocks, you want to watch trust evaporate as a developer, make a bunch of promises and then don't deliver. We've seen a lot of that in early blockchain. In early blockchain, developers are often subjected to forces outside their control, and they fail on those promises. You can see why Cliff has become less willing to give dates and details. It's a rough spot being a dev these days, in your opinion. Yeah, I agree with that completely. I also think that there's an extra level of scrutiny that comes with players in your game that now define themselves as investors rather than just players. There's another level of responsibility. And also, regardless of making promises and, development, I think development in general is harder than gamers understand it to be. We've seen games like The Last of Us come out, and Last of Us documentary, where at the end of it, they mentioned hey man, 3 weeks before launch, or no, not 3 weeks, 3 months before launch, and they were in development for years. 3 months before launch, and they didn't know whether the game was going to be fun because the gameplay hadn't ironed out all the kinks yet. They literally had spent years and years and years and millions of dollars in budget, not knowing if the game was yet going to be fun, because as the game continued to develop, things continuously changed, things continuously broke, new improvements were made, and it's just the nature of building, I guess you could say, that every little thing affects everything else in these virtual worlds. Yeah, it's definitely another level of scrutiny, and then also another level of responsibility, not just scrutiny, because any comments on various topics or different things that could change in the game now affect markets and players in interpretation of those words, even if even if those interpretations are like wildly incorrect, it still affects markets, and it's tough because I mean now you see like when you look at the Federal Reserve with the United States, like they come out and their words are very guarded and very to the point and very scrutinized ahead of time in preparation for any meeting because they know any word or any sign of instability or incompetence, can lead to massive market moves. People interpret what they say because of the power that they hold, and right or wrong, those interpretations can have dramatic effects. Cliff comes out making a joke that like transcendence no longer, or that transcendence actually, I don't know, aren't as powerful as you thought, and all of a sudden the entire market dumps and everything could be affected from it. It's crazy. It's partially not fair, but it's also, I guess, part of being human, right? The market implications that affect people's worth. As another great point, why be a blockchain game dev? It sounds so stressful. I mean, I guess there is also, the idea of, exploring the forefront of the development of video games, right? Like that's what intrigues me the most, and wanting to get more involved with the video game industry. When you think about all the video game legends that came in the past and like all the marks that they left on the history of gaming, like that's an intriguing concept, and there's also financial reward too. If you're able to pull off one of these virtual economies, if you're able to actually develop it and it works out, like to the victor goes the spoils, like there is a significant amount of worth that potential that can be unlocked to the first group of people that figure it out. It's a race, right? Because blockchain games have blockchain whales, which are on a different level. This is true. Now the other thing is that like a lot of these blockchain whales, right? It just comes with the territory. If you had invested $200 in Ethereum when Ethereum was $75, now all of a sudden you're sitting on multiple $1,000s worth of income. Apply that out to scale. You invested $3,000, $4,000 when it was $75, which doesn't seem compared to a person's income for the entire year, $3,000 can be something that people can save up to. And a decision to click a button to buy one of those cryptocurrencies at the right time could turn into thousands and thousands of dollars. So these whales essentially have been born overnight and are now splashing around with their versions of Ferraris with NFTs. It's good and it's bad. It can spur economies and it can break economies. But as things evolve, I think things will become a little more calm. Speculation will come down. Like a lot of things, like one of my personal theses right now on crypto is that the idea of getting in early into projects is now the tent pole. It is now every single person that's a crypto investor knows that that's what you need to do. And because they know that, that's a flaw now, in my opinion. I no longer am looking for being the first into projects. That time has passed. Even new projects. Now I'm looking for feasibility. We've had years and years of years. Well, not years and years. We've had, ever since 2017, we've had development of all of these projects take place, and we've seen what's worked and what's failed. And so now we're either looking for the iteration of the new thing, or we're looking for the project that has been able to hit those hurdles and still survive to be able to push forward, because that longevity is what's key in these markets, I think. So we'll see. CJ Warlocks comes in and says, are all of these added responsibilities, so-called liability factors, being considered by AAA companies when turning down blockchain development? Right now, I wouldn't say so. I do think those are legitimate concerns, but I don't think that that's what AAA developers are thinking right now. I think they're thinking very, very broadly and just saying like, what's the total market here and what is the potential market for the future? Is this something that we should experiment with now so that we don't miss a potential trend? You know, like, for example, it's the same logic I think that that AAA studios made when the Xbox was released. Like, you had a bunch of developers that were making games on Nintendo and PlayStation, and all of a sudden this Xbox is going to come out, and they have to say, like, they had to make the decision, like, look, we don't know if it's going to be successful, but it's probably worth some type of investment to make sure that we don't miss out on this trend if it takes over the gaming system, console space. You know, though that same logic I think is the same here. The only difference is that now with the internet and the ability to share information, I think it makes it compounds and makes the stakes a lot higher. So because the stakes are higher, I think you have to look at it. I think the AAA studios are looking at it like, okay, the stakes are so high that now what we need to do is we need to consider whatever we're doing as research and development. So if it fails, that's fine. Like, we're not doing it to create a successful product. We're doing it to experiment and gain experience in the field. And if they're not thinking of it that way, then they're thinking of it as our time in this space is limited. We no longer have the ability to survive going into like 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future. The GameStops of the world, the mobile developers that sunk a lot of income in, or a lot of production value into one game that turned out to be a flop. You know, these are the companies that are like, look, we're on our last stilts here. We need to take a big risk, and we need to go somewhere where there's potentially a huge reward to be able to make it even further. That's why Ubisoft launched that NFT that on the NFTs for, man, I'm blanking on the game. Can someone please remind me? That's why they launched it for, it's not Rainbow Six Siege, is it? No, it's not Siege. They launched it for another game, but like they launched it on the Tezos. But it was a game that they already knew that, hey, look, this game is months away from closing. You know, let's go ahead and try to roll out these NFTs, get a little experience on it, and if it fails, whatever, then we're going to close down the game like we were already planning to. And that's exactly what happened. The Ubisoft NFT thing. Yeah, it's called Digits. Let me just Google it real quick. Digits is for what game? Let's see. It's for Ubisoft Quartz, Ubisoft Digits, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. That was the game. They already knew that, hey, based on on feedback from the past from players and based on the current numbers, this game's not going to last another 6 months. Okay, now that we know that this is going to happen, this is less of a risk to go ahead and take blockchain we have more incentive to go ahead and take a blockchain risk right now. We don't know how it's going to play out, but let's just see. Maybe we turn a game that's going to die in 6 months into a game that lasts 2 to 4 more years. You know, and that is a very calculated risk. It didn't work out for them. That's not what ended up happening. So they just cut their losses and they ran, you know. Now, though, I think that is the most likely scenario. And I think that's why GameStop is becoming involved, is because they have a dying business model. They will not survive prior to the GameStop stock market debacle from a few years ago. Prior to that, they were on a time limit, you know. Now that time limit has been extended, but they still don't have an answer to a successful business model anymore because of the digitalization of games. So now they still know, look, we have enough funding to be able to make it 3 to 4 years. How are we best going to use these 3 or 4 years to develop a completely new business model? They still are in the same problem. And what do? They turn to the risky new market that they could potentially take a foothold in, crypto. But yeah, that's what I think the future of AAA gaming within this space is going to look like. But I mean, just with the way the economy's been in general across the world, there's a big chance that there's a lot of money at stake, and with a lot of money comes power, and with that power, we're going to see it unfold in front of our eyes with the adoption of new games into Web3 tech. We'll just see how it plays out. Let's jump back over to the Q&A real quick. Let's see. Oops.
Interoperability and transparency. Isn't it the case that that actually undermine business models of game developers, because actually any other team can instantly take over the user base quite easily, because it's all on the blockchain. They can simply deploy some other solution, says do the airdrop or something like that. So it starts to be a very competitive market. Isn't it actually a threat for blockchain games?
You know, but before he answers it, I'll give you my perspective on it, because I think that's a really big one to touch on. The question is, isn't it too big of a threat because of the open nature of the metaverse? Isn't it too big of a threat for people to compete, because your idea and your product can be easily stolen, by doing a vampire attack, by within crypto, by doing an airdrop, trying to steal your customers over to the other. So I would come out and say that already exists in traditional games, Apex, Fortnite came out with the big battle royale, and then we see Call of Duty, we see PUBG, we see. Actually, I don't know. Was it PUBG or PUBG was first, right? I don't know. But my point is that you saw all these other game companies start to iterate on that in an attempt to be able to steal those players, and create their own system. So that already exists. Also, when it comes to the idea of airdropping and being able to steal customers, we already saw that play out in a huge way. We saw Uniswap come out and take over the market with their DEX. And then we saw Sushi Swap come out and offer incentives to all Uniswap holders to come on over. And if you come on over, you get this airdrop, and you get you're rewarded with these tokens. And it worked a lot. It upped their popularity. It upped their brand recognition. They became a known name across crypto for various months. Okay, as time has progressed, it's just been a competition between the two. Sushi Swap, who was the originator, is the one who looks to have won out. But I'm sorry, I said Sushi Uni. Excuse me. Okay, we're good. But that's only the beginning of it, right? Once you get the people in, you can't just be doing the same thing, or else then they just have a choice to choose whenever they want to go back and forth. You have to specialize. You have to do something unique. And that's for other Web3 projects. For crypto games, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because you would still have to build out the entire digital, in the whole world. But theoretically, anyone can come in and buy Lost Relics items if they want, and then make their own game and say hey, Lost Relics players, come over here, use your items over here, and play, whatever the new game is, right? But it wouldn't be Lost Relics. It wouldn't be a clone of Lost Relics, and you're playing the exact same thing over there. There would just be no incentive for players to go over. Why do that when you can already do that here? You see what I'm saying? But there could be other unique methods for it, but we'll see how it plays out.
Well, it's a good question, but there's a bit of a misconception there, right? So if you think about it, just because totally, the smart contracts are open, they're transparent, they're interoperable, and that's a beneficial thing in that, again, as a player that, you can transfer value from one game to another, right? But it doesn't mean that you could just copy a game's smart contracts or the way it's designed its economy and somehow shift all of its players over. Because if you're the developer of a game and you've published these smart contracts and you've set up the rules for your economy, and you've created a game that attracts a lot of players, those players then store value in that economy.
Like you guys are saying in chat.
Copy the code. You can't just design a game.
It would be a competition of gameplay rather than play to earn. It will probably be a combination of both, but I think gameplay would remain king.
To move to your game, first of all, and spend their time and energy there and start spending dollars there, but also transfer the value that they have stored in the assets in your game.
Yeah, Warlocks, I am on the same one.
Your network. as opposed to just being able to use the items.
Over the past couple of days, the only time I've been playing is while I've been streaming. So.
Offer some other game attractive. They will have very hard time to move these users because user will need to leave everything because for Warcraft by moving. If you have interoperable blockchain where user own his assets, then the user can make that choice. How to make that choice, and that actually puts the game developer very.
Hold on, let me go back. I had a hard time hearing that question.
To leave everything because for Warcraft by moving. If you have interoperable blockchain where user own his assets, then the user can make that choice. How to make that choice?
Yeah, but they can make that choice anytime. They can make the choice to leave whenever they want. That choice is never going to go away. Video games are going to continue to be made.
Yeah. Since there wasn't a microphone, so everybody can hear the question, it's, hey, if these assets really live on the blockchain and users can do what they like with them, couldn't they take the asset from one game to another, or transfer the value of the asset from one game to another? And in a traditional game like World of Warcraft, you can't do that. So that kind of creates a protective, a walled garden around the game itself. And so that's true. But the flip side of it is you also limit how much value players ascribe to the game itself and how big that economy can be. So if people are willing to spend, $10 on an item in World of Warcraft and know that it's just an expense, they don't own the item and they can't do what they want with it, well, that's great. They're willing to spend $10. But if they knew that they can own it and they can transfer it to another game if the developer, displeases them, or if there's another game that's even better and can interoperate with the same assets, they might pay a lot more just to know that they could resell the good. So you create a bigger game economy this way. And it's this, what you're describing is the same thing as, back in the day, there used to be a feudal economy system where there was a lord of the land who controlled everything and everybody else was just a serf. And yeah, it was great for the lord of the land at the time because they were the boss and they got to set all the rules and the serfs didn't really own anything. But the economy's got a lot bigger and people did a lot better when you opened things up and you had a market economy where everybody owns things and everybody has to compete, including developers. And the best developers in this new world where you incorporate blockchain games will embrace this and create games that are really designed to empower players and grow the biggest economy possible. And then as a player, you won't just simply, take your asset from one game to another. You're going to go to the game that has the richest economy and the most players and the best gameplay and, has your friends there. So it is a mindset shift and there is a risk in the sense that, boy, I'm a developer. I'm used to just controlling the whole world. But the downside of that is you have a much, much smaller potential economy than if you open it up and create a real market economy.
But also from just a pure game design standpoint, taking an asset from one game, whether you own it or not, taking it into another game is,
right.
I think you would actually have to design that into the game. You would have to have
so let me comment on that really quick. Like, a lot of people say that you can't do that. You can't take items from one game to another. And I think that those are the tools that companies are building out right now. Like Microsoft, I bet you, is making their own Rediverse where you can take your Halo 2 battle rifle over to a Bethesda game or whatnot, because they now own Bethesda. I bet you that's going to happen in the future. But there's already new technologies that are being built by for example, take NVIDIA, right? Who are one of the, obviously one of the largest technology companies involved in the video game industry. They're already inventing technology that they call the Omniverse, which pretty much is the idea of this open platform where digital development occurs on and then has the ability to transfer, because of the standards that they use, from different pieces of software to different pieces of software. So you could be an architect designing a building in your architectural software, whatever the industry standard is, but using the Omniverse, that same file is able to be read across. That same file is able to be read by someone who designs and manufactures airplanes, and those airplanes are then able to be read by someone who makes any other type of digital modeling system. Now, none of those are video game makers, but what happens when you plug a video game developer into that system that now has digital objects from all these different industries that are now uniquely coded to be able to exist in these different environments because of the software. So you guys should Google it or watch the keynote from NVIDIA. It's called the Omniverse. And it is exactly the idea. It's a potential solution to the idea of how do digital objects move from one universe to another, from one piece of software to another. It's fascinating.
Several games that got together and talked about our designs so that you can get an asset out of one game and go take it into another game. I think the ownership is more that I have it, I can give it to my friend, I can sell it to somebody, or I can auction it off.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely transferring a particular asset from game to game is, a lot of people talk about that in terms of interoperability of NFTs, but it doesn't really make sense for most game designs. Like the particular, you can't move a sword in an RPG over to a racing game, a racing car game. Or you can't, even within two RPGs, the mechanics work differently. Well, you can't transfer the value, right?
We actually got that announcement a couple days ago by the My Metaverse team in Engine. In their GTA server, decided to implement the Lost Relics Founders token. If you own the Lost Relics Founders token in that game, if you're holding it in your wallet and you're connected to that server, now as a Lost Relics founder, you have access to this, to a special vehicle, the same color blue as the Founders Stone, So it's like the Founders token. So it's technically not a token in that world, but like it has a representation in that world that the developer chose to use. And let me read here the chat really quick because you guys are really going at it. Let's see. Let's see. If another game is better, coming from Dr. Loot, if another game is better, then gamers will flock to better games. It's natural. Blockchain gaming is in its infancy. People will jump around in many games, checking out their ideas, and I believe great games will win out. Let's see. Let's see. For established games, you don't really have one title being objectively better than another. At least not now, since competition for MMOs has been going on for decades. That's very true. And also, we're a world of 2.5 billion gamers in the world. There's going to be so many games that are populated by so many different players. And the number is going to grow. Everyone's going to play video games. We almost already do, So I think individuals should at least try to be long-standing. Yeah, that's a good point because right now, traditional video game models, video games last. I guess I missed a room. Damn, that sucks. Video games only last for really, the peak of a game is between the first 3 and 6 months of a game's life is when it peaks, and then from there on out, player base comes down. Some games find a level that they sustain for a long time, and then as they release content, it spikes back up, but that level remains the same. And other games, drop to 0 and die, and that's going to continue to happen. We're not going to see that go away. There's no perfect approach since you can't predict the future, of course. CJ Warlock says, I agree with Dr. Loot, and that makes the transfer of wealth and assets abilities so awesome. I did miss a room. Dr. Loot says, I see all kinds of blockchain games being viable. From shit games to great games. Some people are actually quitting jobs in certain areas of the world to play games like Axie. Even if you think it's horrible, some players are making more than 40 hours a week, 40 hours of work a week inside these digital worlds. That's because the money people toss around and play to earn games operates at a higher level. Let me see. Of magnitude than the income of the regions in the world, which is true. And I would say that rightfully so, because these digital worlds are global. Anybody can join them. Theoretically, anybody can join them from anywhere around the world, versus working in your local city. Only the people that are located in that city are going to be able to work for that in that town, if that makes sense. Let's see. Axie is probably the worst example because the mindset this brought about was referred to was unsustainable by one of the main devs. You have to remember also, like, nobody knew it was unsustainable. Like, you have to remember that, like, I mean, I'm sure people speculated that it wasn't. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that thought it wasn't going to work, and rightfully so. But in general, from the amount of hype and the amount of attention that it got, you know, very few people could actually predict out what was going to happen, especially during the peak, especially during the reach up to the peak, I guess you could say. Everyone was watching it because it never had happened before. So it's really hard to say. Also, you have to remember that, like, the developers of the Axie economy was actually Delphi Digital. You remember they came in and they wrote a bunch of papers and helped design the economy of Axie. And I'm kind of surprised here that a lot of people don't necessarily critique them and still continue to critique the developers for the implementation of that model and iteration of that model, you know. You know, it's hard to see in real world how you know, theoretical white papers will actually work out when they get real world adoption, like Axie did for a time, you know. If a high proportion of people are playing to solely cash out, it eventually destroys the market and ecosystem and promotes semi-toxic community relations. I think that community relations and the toxicity don't necessarily derive just from that aspect. I mean, I'm sure that aspect can influence it as well. But I think we have much deeper issues as gamers that we need to resolve, and as a world that I think affects our interactions with each other more than what the development team of Axie was anticipating or planning for, I guess. But let's jump back to it.
If you can sell the sword or the car, then you could move that value and get it back and put it into another game. But again, all you're thinking there is developers basically, or players today, just assume that when they make a purchase, it's an expense and there is no value they can transfer. So there's really not any downside, and you know, players will still make pure expenses, right? But there's only upside in letting them also, you know, expand their purchases to things they own.
Over here.
Hi, this is awesome. I'm learning a ton because my knowledge of gaming is fairly limited, but really curious to see how y'all see the notion of identity evolving. It seems like there's almost a dichotomy between kind of the blockchain community that really wants to prioritize anonymity and privacy versus players who, I mean, it seems like they're almost incentivized to be known on platforms, either for money or, I guess, platform status. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question too. So there's a mix of things that happen with games today. There's definitely a lot of pseudonymous or anonymous players in games. Like in some of the games I play, like I played, we talked about World of Warcraft and many other games. I didn't want anybody in those games to know who I was in the real world. So, you know, I had player aliases, and players even will have many characters or many accounts within an individual game sometimes. And you can do the same thing in a pseudonymous world with blockchain as well. One thing that is really interesting to think about, which blockchain could unlock, is the idea of sovereign identity and the ability for players to carry an identity from game to game in a way that is verifiable, trustlessly. And that's something that's not really possible in games today. But when you can do that, you could say things like, "Hey, I was the leader of the most successful guild in World of Warcraft." I mean, Josh was not actually that person, but whoever that was could say that, and then maybe that helps them recruit players in another game in the future. So you can use blockchain in both ways. You can use it to empower pseudonymous play, which is how most games work today, or real identity potentially in the future as well, which again just unlocks more design possibilities.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Andre.
Not much to add
so
on that
you said
one. It all comes back to design
blockchain
possibilities and
allows player
implementation.
to own the asset, but isn't it the game, the off-chain engine of the game determines the properties of the asset? So like even if blockchain recommends this sword has a power of 100, game developers can easily override it or even stop recognizing that item? Just curious, what's your comment on it?
Yeah, it's a really good question too. So there's two things. One, if a developer is just willy-nilly changing the values of what the items do, like the characteristics and how they behave, then they're going to limit the size of their economy because players will trust them, less. So yes, the players own the assets, but the developer is changing the way that the assets work inside of the game too much. And so what would happen is players can start to sell those assets off because they're displeased with the developer for making too many changes. So that gives the players much more control and ownership than they would have otherwise, where the developer could do that anyway. And so the best developers that really embrace these market economies will put more and more of the characteristics that determine how the items work and their provenance and the history of changes onto the blockchain so that they can't change it. But the second thing is, there will be a world. The larger, if we really started to see examples of games that create, even smaller games that create like $30 billion a year economies in the example that we talked about, then there'll be a huge incentive to figure out how to get more and more of the compute that happens in a game, more and more of the processing that happens in the game to happen trustlessly. And that doesn't all need to happen on a blockchain. There's a lot of emerging tech.
Say that again.
The larger, if we really started to see examples of games that create, even smaller games that create like $30 billion a year economies in the example that we talked about, then there'll be a huge incentive to figure out how to get more and more of the compute that happens in a game, more and more of the processing that happens in the game to happen trustlessly. And that doesn't all need to happen on a blockchain. There's a lot of emerging technologies now for trustless, general, verifiable computation. And we're working with some folks in that space that over time, the bigger these games get, the more incentive there will be to create those, to accelerate the creation of those solutions where all the properties of the way that the items that are stored on the blockchain, the value might be stored on the blockchain and the rules that govern the transactions or the transfer of the items might all be on the blockchain, but the compute associated with how the items are used in the game might move more and more to these trustless off-chain systems. Your physics and your rendering in the game, and
so he's talking about the
all
Omniverse.
Things that really just affect the gameplay experience. That doesn't really need to be on a blockchain, but the way the items are used, the way their characteristics work, will be increasingly trustless the more that these market economies are adopted in games.
Okay, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Good talk there, guys. Good talk. Yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot for sure. Let me go ahead and take this one off the screen there. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up. Again, another stream without completing the bounty, unfortunately. Let's see. Yeah, applaud for the. Yeah, it was a good little talk there. Remember, it was about a year old, so we've had some lessons learned since then. But still, again, a good little fundamental idea about the concepts of crypto game development that are currently going on. The idea, obviously, a lot of talk about market economies and what it can mean for digital worlds. The idea of iteration in this space is going to be really important. I think we're at a really interesting crossroads right now with I don't know if I want to necessarily say the downfall of Axie, but the turn down that Axie is currently going through because of the issues that they've had with gameplay, with economics, and with hacking, unfortunately. I do think that blockchain gamers that have chosen to stay in the space and not necessarily moved on yet or returned back to traditional gaming, I think they're all in search of the next big Axie. And there's some runners up in that category. We have games like Illuvium, we have games like Ember Sword, Guild of Guardians, Big Time, Lost Relics. We have a bunch of different games that are vying for that type of recognition, and we're going to see each one of them is going to have their own unique solutions. Whichever the next big one that hits is, whichever the next big one that hits is, they're going to have their own unique aspects to it, and people are going to ascribe their success to those unique aspects, whatever they may be. And then other developers are going to have to choose and decide whether or not that is the real reason for their success. Either iterate on it or disagree with it and build something different. The counter, I guess you could say. CJ Warlocks, my takeaway is that we're all smarter. We are smarter than our friends we invite to blockchain games, but never showed up. I agree with you. We're early. We're early to the party, and with being early comes certain benefits and certain risks. Only if you're cashed out positive. Only if you're cashed out positive. It just depends. I don't know what's gonna happen, but we're gonna have to see. I'm probably gonna wrap up this stream after we're done with this little run here, guys. Looks like I'll have to be completing this bounty off stream because I need to get some food. We had a good little talk there, I think. You never put anything. You never put anything in, but your time. Your time is valuable, though. So time is money. Time is money. But we'll see. We'll see. I know that Big Time today had the launch of their gameplay or their early access, I guess you could say. And the game was looking pretty impressive, not going to lie. We'll see if they're in the running. I know Illuvium's really close to release. I haven't been following it too closely, though. Let's see. You missed the first half, but your wife had a scrap booking emergency. Don't worry, you'll be able to catch it. You'll be able to catch the video on demand either on Twitch. You are on Twitch right now, but also it's going to YouTube, so you'll be able to see it there for sure. I think I might want to be doing some more of these, guys. There's a lot of videos. This one I've seen before. It'd been a long time though, so I was trying to remember from the past. But there's definitely a lot more that I want to check out. So if you guys enjoyed hanging out and doing a little grinding, listening to a little bit of blockchain gaming talk, then I think this is something we might be rolling into the future. Also planning a little podcast with Ivana, your one and only favorite streamer. So hopefully we'll be able to get something worked out there to where we can go live sometime soon to be able to have a little Lost Relics chat. Always the possibility of getting feedback from Cliff about a potential update. That the time is ticking. We're at that time of the year. Got Infinity coming here soon. I think a lot of you have asked me, and I haven't made a video yet about an Infinity talk. If that's something that you guys want to, make sure to hit me up and let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter for sure at FMuñozCPA, or you can find me on Discord if you're not already there. I'm definitely in the Lost Relics Discord, so you'll be able to hit me up there, go through the Overseer and see all the beautiful items that I have found. But I'm going to wish you guys luck. Someone needs to find the next Transcendent. It's been a little while since we've hit one, so good luck to you all. I hope you all had a good time. I will definitely be catching up with you all a little bit later.